And what the teaching says is the reason why human beings suffer is because human beings are living in a world that doesn't exist. Human beings are living in what could be called the thought world. Human beings are living in a world that occurs for them as a function of thinking. And so in other words, if I ask you who you are, if I ask you what your identity is, you will tell me what you think. That's the only place you have to go for an answer, is what you think. But the problem with that is that your true nature, the natural state, what you and I actually are, can't be thought. It can't be thought. So thinking won't be able to answer the question of who are you. And through the practice of meditation, by sitting still and being silent and moving attention away from the thinking activity, which is producing an interpretation of everything all the time. The thought process is producing an interpretation of everything all the time. Not a direct perception of things, but rather an interpretation of things. Where do you get the interpretation? From your conditioning. When you were an infant, you had no language, you didn't know the world, you didn't know your body, you didn't know anything. Around the age of 2 years old, you start to learn language, and when you start to learn language, you start to learn the world. Language is the means by which we interpret what we see and turn it into knowing, turn it into what we know. Right? And the world that we think about and the world that we know through thought is a world that is in existence by virtue of agreement. It's an existence by virtue of agreement. What do I mean by that? Well, we all live in time. We all experience time, right? We all keep track of time and so forth and so on, right? But time doesn't actually exist. Time exists because we all agree that it does. That's the only reason it exists. There is no actual time. Even the present moment doesn't exist in terms of time. We talk about being mindful, being present to the moment, being in the now. But if what we mean by that is being between the past and the future, if the way you understand time is the now is what's between the past and the future, then your understanding of the now is based on time. The only problem with that is time doesn't actually exist. So if you want to experience now, the now that can be experienced doesn't exist between the past and the future. And when we experience meditation and we move attention away from the thought process and we become aware of the body breathing, the awareness of the body breathing as we pay attention to the breath, we're paying attention to what could be called now, not in time, just what could be called now. How long is now? It doesn't have time. Now does not have time. Now doesn't last for a time. Now happens in an immeasurable moment. But if we're paying attention to the body breathing, we are being present to that immeasurable moment. If we're paying attention to the body breathing, we're experiencing now, not in time. This is very important because what the ancient traditions discovered through the practice of meditation is when we move our attention away from the thought process, it becomes possible to experience what's called the natural state, what's called being, what's called your true nature, which is awareness itself. Awareness itself. So when we're practicing being aware of the body breathing and we're moving our attention away from the thought process, we're experiencing the truth. We're experiencing the reality of what we are, and the reality of what we are is awareness, and that awareness is aware of the body breathing. And so when we're away from thought, we can begin to discover things as they actually are, like there's no time. Things as they actually are, like I am not this body. When we move attention away from thinking and we're aware of the body breathing, just by virtue of the fact that we're aware of the body, we're looking at the body, we can't be something that we're looking at. We can't be something that we're aware of. And so just by experiencing, being aware of the body breathing, we're experiencing the truth, which is that we are not this body, we are aware of this body. This is actually an experience that you can have if you allow yourself to be a witness to the body and be aware of the entire body at the same time. You can do that. You can do that right now. Just allow yourself to be aware of the entire body at the same time. And if you're aware of the entire body at the same time, your body must be in awareness rather than awareness be in your body. So the truth can be experienced. What is not true, what we believe, cannot be experienced. It can only be understood by thinking. And so the traditions came up with the idea that if we practice meditation consistently, if we practice experiencing not thinking consistently, and we practice experiencing the awareness that is real, that is our true natural nature, that we will come out of a condition in which suffering occurs. Because when we live in the thought world, we live in the time world, we're living in a world in which we have concerns about what's going to happen in the future, and we have negative memories about what happened in the past. And so we live in a condition of time, and this condition of time has an impact on our experience. So we carry with us the burden of what happened to us in the past, and we carry with us the concern and apprehension about what's going to happen to us in the future. And we live in that condition all the time. That condition is a stressful condition. It's a fear-based condition. And we live as an identity. In the thought world, we live as an identity. The identity we live as in the thought world, that identity has the name you were given. It has the name you were given when you were a baby. That identity has the beliefs that you believe are true about yourself, like you believe you are the body. Most people believe they are the body. Most people believe they are the identity that they were given at birth that has the name they have. These are beliefs. And a belief is not the truth. A belief is only something that we take on to believe, take on to consider. We consider it to be the truth, whether it is or not, and we live as if it's the truth, whether it is or not. And if you're living as if you are something that you're not, and you're living in a condition that is generated by an illusion called time, you're living in a situation in which suffering occurs. How does the suffering occur? First of all, you consider yourself to be the personality that you took on as a child. So you're being that personality. And as that personality, you're paying attention to what's happening all the time and comparing it all the time to what should be happening. And when what's happening should be happening, you're calm and you're happy and you're content. And what's happening is not what should be happening, you get upset because it's not meeting your expectations. So the voice in your head is always comparing what's happening to what you believe or what you think should be happening. And the voice in your head is not you. This is one of the things you discover through the practice of meditation. It starts to become evident to you just by observing and witnessing it directly that the voice in my head is not me. I know this because if I'm looking to see what I think, if I have to look to see what the voice says to know what I think, then the voice can't be me, because the only way I know what I think is to look to see what the voice says. And the voice is always talking to me. It's describing things to me. It's judging and evaluating everything. And it's got a life of its own. This isn't something that we normally realize because we're identified with the voice. We think the voice is us. We think, I'm just thinking. That's what's happening. I'm just thinking. But when you study the tradition, when you study the traditional teachings of the truth, which say that that voice is not you, and the personality is not you, and if you live your life thinking that you are the personality and thinking that the voice in your head is you, you will live a life that involves a lot of suffering. Because that voice is a voice that's running from a program. The program is your conditioning, and that conditioning has a purpose. That conditioning is for survival. So that voice is always looking at what's happening, or that voice is always interpreting what you're seeing and telling you whether it's good or bad, right or wrong, or whether it's going to hurt you or cause you to have pleasure. It's doing that all the time by itself. You're not doing it, it's doing it. Right? And if you think you're the thinker of the thoughts, then you think you're doing it, but you're not doing it. You're not judging and evaluating anything. You are aware of the judging and evaluating, but you are not that which is judging and evaluating. It's happening in the brain and in the mind, and it's happening by itself. It's called thinking. It's called thinking. So through these practices, we're learning that we can experience being awake and aware without thought. And when we are being awake and aware, we see things differently than the thoughts tell us that they are. When we're aware and we're practicing being mindful, we're aware that we are not this body. I'm looking at this body breathing. We are aware that I am not the personality. The personality only exists in thinking. What I am when I'm practicing meditation and I move my attention away from the thought activity is I experience myself as the awareness that's aware of the body breathing. And this is the same awareness that's aware of thinking. The awareness is aware of thinking. The awareness is our true identity, it's our true nature. This is something we experience directly when we practice meditation. And if we practice meditation consistently over time, we begin to experience a more stable and more consistent experience of being awake and being aware as awareness itself. And we also begin to experience that when we're experiencing being what we actually are as the awareness itself, that we experience a state of peace. We experience a state of well-being in which we feel satisfied, content, relaxed. This is what's available. If you practice meditation consistently, and meditation is a practice, meaning that you can't just do this once in a while. You can't just do this like a hobby. You can't just do this when you feel like it. It won't work if you do it that way. The only way meditation works is if it's done like brushing your teeth. It's done every single day without fail. And to do something every single day without fail, like a practice, you're going to have to deal with your mind, because your mind does not want to be controlled. Your mind does not, especially when it comes to meditation, your mind does not want to practice meditation, because according to the programming that exists in the mind, if you move attention away from that programming, the programming thinks you're dying. The brain is not awake, you are. The brain is not alive, the awareness is alive. And so when we move attention away from the thought activity, although the brain and the mind may react like, oh, I'm dying because I can't be the personality without thinking, therefore I'm dying, so the system starts to try and pull you back in. That's why your attention keeps going back to thought when you're practicing, because the system doesn't want to let you go. The system wants to keep you in the system as a personality, even though that doesn't work and it results in suffering. So through these practices, we begin to wake up. We begin to come out of the condition of thinking and suffering and identifying ourselves as a personality, and we begin to experience the freedom of being in my life and seeing things the way they actually are, not the interpretation. Coming into an understanding of who I am, not like an interpretation, but like an experience, direct experience of who I am as awareness itself. And when I'm experiencing being this awareness, there is a sense of freedom. There is a sense of well-being. There is a sense of relaxation. There is a sense of clarity. They call this, a lot of times in the East, they call this enlightenment. Enlightenment. What's enlightenment? It's not the mystical, esoteric thing that a lot of people believe it is. Enlightenment is a simple matter of waking up and realizing that your true nature is awareness itself, not the personality that you've been being in the world. And so as you continue to practice this awareness, you begin to experience a different reality, a reality in which your experience of yourself is that you have no form. The awareness that you are is your true nature, And this awareness that you are has no form. This awareness that you are is not a man or a woman. It's not physical. This awareness that you are only exists in the present moment. This awareness that you are doesn't need anything. It doesn't want anything. It's not going anywhere. It's not coming from anywhere. If you want to do an exercise that will be useful in experiencing the bare awareness that is the reality of what you and I are, you can go to Mooji's teaching on the internet and listen to The Invitation. The Invitation is a guided meditation that this teacher does that helps people to get to the bottom line of bare awareness itself. And when you realize that bare awareness itself is your true nature, and you realize that when you're experiencing yourself as this true nature, that you feel happy, satisfied, content, and peaceful, then it becomes evident that living an awake life is critical, it's important. That your life will not be fulfilling unless you wake up and experience your true nature as awareness itself. And this is a process that takes time. We visit it in meditation, but only very briefly when your attention is away from the thought process. We visit it, but only very briefly. And if you continue to do the formal practice, you will experience that you experience more space, more time in the experience of being awake and aware as your true nature. And this feels like a relief. But this will only happen if you stay in the practice consistently every single day without fail, and if you're practicing the way the practice is meant to be done, and if you're practicing for a sufficient amount of time to get into the experience of your true nature as awareness itself. And if you do this over time, eventually you will be clear about what meditation is. You'll be clear about what the experience is. You'll be clear when you're in the experience of meditation. And when that's the case, then it becomes possible to start to practice informally. Because the goal is to wake up and realize your true nature and to be in that experience consistently. And if you're in that experience consistently, you're in the experience of well-being, and you're in the experience of being happy, satisfied, content, and peaceful. And as you're practicing living life in that experience, your brain changes. Your brain changes. Your brain starts to replace the conditioned understanding of everything and the beliefs that you've had that haven't been working. That starts to get replaced by the truth. It happens naturally, just by your experiencing things as they actually are. The brain starts to reorganize itself to be consistent with that experience. This is called neuroplasticity. The scientists are telling us now that meditation changes your brain, and it begins in as little time as 8 weeks. So meditation is not just for stress reduction, it's about waking up and realizing the possibility of being happy and peaceful and satisfied in your life. But it's not a free lunch. It's not going to happen automatically. You've got to establish a practice in which you come out of experiencing yourself as a ghost, experiencing yourself as something that doesn't actually exist, as a self-concept, and begin to experience yourself as the reality of what you are, which is awareness itself. And by doing the informal practice, now we're not trying to control the situation. We're not trying to control the environment as we did in the formal practice. We have to do that in the formal practice because it's almost impossible to do the meditation practice as we're living our lives because there's too much stimulation. We just can't do it. So we use the formal practice. Once you get sufficiently stabilized in the formal practice, you can begin to practice informally, which means now you're going to practice all the time. You're going to begin to pay attention all the time to the awareness, and you're going to practice by resting as that awareness for short periods of time as often as possible. But the difference now is you're doing the practice as you're living your life. As you're talking, as you're driving your car, as you're cooking, as you're having sex, as you're doing everything in your life, you're now focusing attention on being aware of awareness itself so that you can be that awareness as you live your life. And if you're being that awareness as you live your life will start to transform. Your life will start to become a different experience and a different life. You'll discover what love is. You'll discover the possibility of unconditional love, and you'll discover your ability to have unconditional love for other human beings and to be that way with the people that you're closest to. So you can start to experience what it's like as the reality of what you are being related to the reality of what all of the rest of humanity is. So whether human beings, whether the 8 billion human beings on the planet know what they actually are or not, you can wake up to what you actually are and relate to the rest of humanity knowing who they actually are, whether they do or not. And this will change your relationships. This will allow you to begin to be calm, grounded, present, and express love for yourself and for other human beings. And to feel well-being on a constant basis, to feel the peace and the freedom and the state of well-being, the satisfaction, the contentment. This is the reason why people go live in caves, to get away so they can practice this and strengthen their experience of their true nature so that when they come back into contact with humanity, they can relate in a way that's workable and satisfying instead of being in conflict and suffering and being angry and depressed and anxious. So as a psychologist, I consider meditation to be a very important practice to teach my clients. Because if they practice meditation and then we work to uncover the beliefs that aren't realistic and we work to recognize where the personality is dysfunctional, and because the person is now more calm and relaxed, they can naturally start to have the changes occur that will allow them to experience a workable life and be happy. Yeah, when you start to get the hang of how all this works, you realize that when you're upset, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to practice experiencing your true nature, which is never upset. The awareness that you are is never upset. It's just here, just aware. Okay? And when you begin to understand that this is the truth, this is your actual nature, and when you're experiencing yourself this way, you're calm, you're satisfied, and you're happy. So it's the conditioned mind and it's the conditioned belief about who you are that has expectations, that thinks that things should be a certain way. The awareness does not think that things should be a certain way. The awareness allows everything to be the way it is all the time. Just lets it be the way it is all the time. That's a pretty smart idea. Why is it a good idea to allow everything to be the way it is? You can't do it as a personality because the voice in your head will keep talking to you and telling you, oh, that's not right. That should be different, right? And you'll get upset about it. That person should be talking to me different. The person that's driving the car in front of me should be driving that car differently. Right? When you wake up, you can begin to experience things as they are, which means when you're driving your car and there are other cars in front of you and other cars behind you. That's what's happening, right? That's all that's happening, right? But if you are using thinking to drive your car, then you have a voice in your head saying, the person in front of you is driving too slow. The person behind you is driving too fast. There's too much traffic and I'm unhappy. That's who you get to be when you use thinking as a way of experiencing your life. If you wake up, you realize, oh, now I'm awake. I'm the awareness of thought, not the thinker. And I can look at the thought and see, that's not a good idea. That's not a good idea for me to believe those thoughts because it ends me up suffering. Better that I should see the thoughts for what they are. Better that I should see the thoughts for what they are. And And what they are is just the survival program running in my mind. That's all that's happening. I don't have to think they're true. I don't have to follow them. As you practice this way of being, the thoughts that were disturbing you and causing you to be upset start to naturally die down and quiet down. So if you continue to learn the Dharma, if you continue to learn about the truth and you continue to practice the truth, eventually your life will be a different experience. So that's what's available.